Steve, we good virtually? Okie doke. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Michael Mulgrew. I'm the president of the United Federation of Teachers of New York City. And I want to thank Secretary Walsh for being here today on such an important subject. As we know, retirement security for our members is one of the most important issues in their lives and in their determination whether to stay in a job as a teacher or caring for children throughout their lives. These things have been challenging over the last decade, to say the least, here in New York City and New York State. But we're working together. We're finding people who want to work with us and trying to come up with a better system. And thankfully, I could say that our legislative session that just passed was our first time in 10 years that we have improved the retirement benefit, which is known as Tier 6 here in New York State. But we still have a long way to go because teachers tend to start their career at the age of 21, and working to the age of 63 is definitely not an incentive for most of them. But that's why it's so important that we're all here today to make sure that we do things so that we, not just the teachers, but everybody who are trying to do things to make sure our communities, our municipalities, our cities and states can continue to deliver the service that we know that people want. And that is what we are constantly fighting for. So I want to now introduce the national president of the American Federation of Teachers, the previous president of the United Federation of Teachers, and my really, really, really good friend, Miss Randi Weingarten. You have to speak into the mic.
We are both virtual and in person, and so we have to speak into the mic so that the people on virtual or on Zoom can actually hear us. So I am so delighted to be here, and that the Labor Department, and frankly, look, I thought Frances Perkins was a really good labor secretary, but this labor secretary is giving her a run for her money. But I'm really honored that we are in not only the House of Labor, but the House of UFT. And when this place was built, or basically bought by us, and Michael was one of our officers then, now the amazing president of the UFT, we bought it and while there was still ashes after 9/11. And we bought it to make it a community center in New York City for labor and the community. And it's so great that you are all here in this place right now. That is what we wanted to do. How do you lift up community? How do you lift up the kind of things that we need to do? And I start that way because retirement security is one of those kind of stanchions, one of those values, one of those foundations that we need to have. And as labor, we need to fight for that for everyone. Yes, of course, we fight for it for our members. But just like healthcare, every American needs to have retirement security. And let me give you just one piece, one fact. Nearly half of Americans have no retirement savings. And for those who have a defined contribution plan, the median balance is $22,000. You tell me how a retiree lives on $22,000 in the United States of America. For an alarming number of Americans, the final decades of their life means living in grinding poverty at the expense of dignity. And like most crises, a lack of retirement security disproportionately impacts women and people of color. So when people say, why are we in the UFT? Why are we in Labor's House about this? Because just like fighting for a living wage, and just like fighting for decent hours of work, and just like fighting for decent conditions, and just like fighting for access to high quality, affordable health care, fighting for decent retirement is all of our jobs, including those of us who still have decent retirement benefits. Woohoo! So, We think that there should be a three-legged stool: defined benefit pension, Social Security, and savings. We believe that that three-legged stool forms the foundation of retirement security in America. But for most Americans, the stool has only had one leg: Social Security, as important as that is, and why I also raise Frances Perkins in the same breath as I will talk about Marty Walsh. Because Social Security has helped stave off poverty, but it's not enough. And the crisis is not about Social Security, which is the healthiest part of our retirement system. It keeps tens of millions of seniors out of poverty and could help millions more if it was expanded rather than these constant crises or attempts to gut it. So we have to engage our partners and at times strange bedfellows to find creative solutions, because simply preserving the gold standard of defined benefit plans, and you just heard Michael, for the first time in a very long time, it got expanded instead of contracted in New York State. While we believe defined benefit plans are the gold standard, it's not sufficient, and they're not available to most. Defined benefit plans, though, are actually deferred wages for workers who have actively contributed to their fund, have actively paid a fair share, and have accepted increased employer contributions, I want to get that right, in lieu of wages. So Social Security, really important. Savings, really important. Defined benefit plans or something like that, really important. And I want to say one more thing and then pass it over to Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, which is that pensions don't just benefit retirees. They benefit the whole economy. The second fact I want you to remember is that according to the National Institute on Retirement Security, every dollar paid out of pension benefits supports $2.13 in economic activity. So you want to know something that is righteous for us to do for individual workers, for individual people, and for the economy? We need to have appropriate and adequate retirement security. And so I am delighted, Kathleen, that you brought us to the UFT to start these conversations. And without further ado, the person who has thought, so many people have thought about this, but the person who has been indefatigable about retirement security for many, many years, she won't let me tell you how many, is Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Randy. The truth is, the reason I started this at all is because I was in California a number of years ago, and I heard, as you can tell, Randi Weingarten give this incredible speech, and I said, Randy, you are so inspiring. I'm going to follow your lead, and I want to fight for retirement security. So thank you, Randy, for being my inspiration. And I also want to thank you, Randy, for serving on the board of the Robert Kennedy Human Rights Center, because you've been so great following through my father's ideal. So I'm really appreciative of that. Thank you, Randy. And my job here today, one of my favorite parts of my job here today is to introduce my good friend and the visionary leader, Tom DiNapoli. Tom, as you know, is the Comptroller of the State of New York, which is an incredible retirement fund for the workers of the state of New York. And Tom believes in using his power smartly and wisely for the workers in New York and for the United States. So, for instance, after Sandy Hook, he immediately took all the gun stocks out of the portfolio. Second of all, he believes that the portfolio should match who lives in New York. So he started to fund emerging managers, both African Americans and women. And he's done a stunningly effective job and run a conference each year that started about 200 people, now has about 1,200 people. And I've gone to it a lot. Yes. Third, he believes very much in figuring out what the corporations give their money to, how they use their political money. So you actually understand they may say they like X, but they give their money to Y. It's very important to know where the money goes. Fourth, he's been a leader before everybody else was even talking about it on ESG, and has come to the Compass Conference for more than a decade, which focuses on ESG. The Compass Conference is run by the Robert Kennedy Memorial. You thought I was going to end with a plug for that with Randy? No way. And fifth, I have to tell you, when I started the Georgetown Center for Retirement Initiatives to help states pass retirement plans, I asked Tom to come. He flew to Washington and helped us launch that center. So Tom, you have been a great friend, and I am so grateful that you're here today. Thank you.
Wow. Well, what can I say? I'll take it. I'm taking you on the road with me, Kathleen. Thank you very much. And Kathleen said we have added speakers, only talk for a minute, but the introduction was my minute, so I will ask for your forbearance. But Kathleen, thank you for being a great friend to me in so many ways, and an inspiration. So Randy, thank you for inspiring Kathleen so she could inspire me to be engaged in the retirement security issue.
We're all in the family.
We're all the family. Thanks to Michael Mulgrew for hosting us here. Thanks to AFT President Randi Weingarten for your passion and your collaboration over the years on these and so many other important issues. And Secretary Walsh, welcome to New York. I hope you spend a lot of money while you're here. You know, we could use the tax revenue. And I'm delighted to be with my comptroller colleague, Brad Lander, and a great congressman who I serve with in the State Assembly, Jerry Nadler's here as well. And really, I want to compliment the Secretary and President Biden for having a point person on this issue, and Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, because there's no one who has been more forthright in saying this is an issue that we have to address. And to have the weight of the administration behind this strategy and this approach and getting this conversation going again, it's very important. I am privileged that part of my responsibility is serving as trustee of the New York Common Retirement Fund. And I know that the 1.1 million New Yorkers who are part of our pension system, they very much depend on the strength of our fund. We're a strong fund, we're well funded, but those pension checks go out to real people. And those retirees have peace of mind, they have economic security, they have dignity in retirement. And dignity, I think, is the word that we all need to be mindful of. But every American is entitled to that same peace of mind, economic security, and dignity. And we know that for so many, as has already been said, and I'm sure we'll hear more specifics about it, are at risk of not retiring with adequate retirement income or not being able to retire at all, have to keep on working. So you look at the state of the defined benefit plans going back, years ago. We know it was a different dynamic in the private sector. Today, about 86% of our public sector workforce still have defined benefit plans, and we're fortunate for those of us in the public sector. Only 16% of private sector workers have a defined benefit pension plan. Very different, 3-4 decades ago, the number was more like 60%. So we've seen a change, and that number keeps going down and down. So states are filling the void to an extent with retirement savings plans. So I'm very pleased New York State is joining in that effort. We have our New York State Secure Choice Savings Program, providing auto enrollment for private sector employees, both business and not-for-profit. It's just getting off the ground. We're one of 14 states. The implementation in New York is really in the early stage, but the board actually met in January, and it's moving forward. But states that have been a little bit ahead of us, they've seen good results. Oregon saves particularly. 100,000 private sector employees have saved $100 million thus far from that program. 80% of employers that were surveyed said no additional costs were incurred with the Oregon Saves program. So that's positive. So of the 14 states that have these kinds of saving programs, 10 have auto enrollment. And for other states that are looking at it, I think auto enrollment is key, portability is key, lifetime income is key. But ultimately, we should learn from the success of these state-centered savings plans, and we do need a national program, a national strategy. And certainly that's what this conversation is about, and I'm pleased to be part of it. I'll just end. Francis Perkins appropriately has been acknowledged, but I want to acknowledge Al Smith also, because I think this was his assembly district, downtown Manhattan. So Al Smith saw, when he was governor, that public workers in New York were retiring in poverty. And so around 1920, he set up a commission and said, we need to have a conversation about retirement security. And that's how the New York State Come Retirement Fund, the New York State and local retirement system began. So we're over 100 years old. It proves that great ideas, in fact, can happen and can work and can be sustainable. So let's hope that this conversation will advance this important need all across our great country. Thanks again.
Nice.
So now I get to introduce Marty Walsh, who we have referred to already. I just cleaned the mic, so we've referred to Marty already. He is our nation's 29th Secretary of Labor. He is serving in the most pro-worker administration that has ever happened in the United States of America. And when I say pro-worker also means pro-union. You can't be pro-worker if you're not pro-union, because unions are the vehicle by which workers get rights. And the fact that President Biden selected Marty to be his labor secretary is an absolute testament and commitment of President Biden to America's working people and to creating an economy that works for all. Many of you may know that Marty's immediate previous job was as mayor of Boston, where amongst other accomplishments, yep, the Massachusetts folks are in the house in New York City right now, was he created during the 7 years he was there 140,000 jobs. He helped secure a statewide minimum wage of $15 an hour. He helped secure, not just advocated for, paid sick leave and paid parental leave. He established a universal, high-quality pre-kindergarten for all children, community college for low-income students, and to our state controller's point, cities and states can be laboratories for really good things, for the social contract, and that's what Marty Walsh did as mayor of Boston. But before that, and you can hear it in, the way he talks. He's the son of Irish immigrants. He was born and raised in Dorchester. Did I say it right?
Yeah, pretty good.
Tried, for a New Yorker. He followed his father into the Laborers Local 223 in Boston. He rose to the head of the Building and Construction Trades Council there. And in that role, he created this kick-ass Building Pathways program that became a model for increasing diversity in workplaces and creating great job opportunities, particularly for women and people of color. This is a man who walks that walk. I'm so honored that you are in our house today, Marty. Secretary Marty Walsh.
Thank you very much, Randy. And first of all, thank you for that introduction. And I just want to thank Randi for her leadership, her friendship, not just in the last 14 months since I've been Secretary of Labor, but for the last 8 years, quite honestly, as mayor of the city of Boston. Oftentimes I'd call Randi to help me out and navigate, not teachers, but how do I navigate the labor movement, how do we move forward. I want to thank you for your friendship and all of your help and your mentorship. To Mike Mulgrew and all the teachers at UFT, I know there's some people watching. I want you to know as well, when COVID began, I would often talk to Mike about, what teachers are going through. And quite honestly, what teachers went through here in this state, in this city, went through the same thing in Boston, and understanding the importance of representing teachers and getting that balance. So Mike, I want to thank you for your leadership and your friendship, quite honestly, over the last couple of years. And thank you for hosting us today in this beautiful building. So thank you. To Congressman Nadler, thank you for having us in your district today. And thank you for your friendship as well in helping us at the Department of Labor with the American Rescue Plan, where you were able to help us get funds to rebuild EPSA, rebuild OSHA, rebuild MSHA, rebuild wage and hour, rebuild many of the departments at the Department of Labor that actually are out there advocating on behalf of workers that were decimated over the last several years. I want to thank you for your support and leadership there as well. To the State Comptroller, Tom, thank you very much, Tom, as well. To Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, Kathleen is certainly is a force on her own, and now inside the Department of Labor, she's a force inside the Department of Labor. And one of the first things Kathleen said to me was she started talking about pensions and defined pension benefits, and explained to me like I didn't know. I said, Kathleen, I was a member of Labor's Local 223. I have 19 good years in my pension. That's as defined as you can get in a benefit plan. So I want to thank you, Kathleen, for your friendship and leadership. And also, there's a lot of other people here at the table. Thank you very much. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Assistant Secretary, Ali Kowar, from the Employment Benefit Security Administration with us today. Thank you, Ali, for being here. And Mary from the office as well. I see Mary down the back. And to all the advocates and workers and experts that are in this room, but more importantly, in some cases, watching this on Zoom or however, I don't know if it's Microsoft or Zoom, thank you for being part of this very important conversation. You heard it a couple different times. Every single American worker should be able to retire with security. And one of the things, I don't tell the story often, but I will tell it now. Randy mentioned I'm a son of immigrants. My father came to this country in 1956. He went to Boston, Massachusetts. He joined Labor's Local 223. He worked for about 45 years as a construction worker. And when he retired, he was able to retire with dignity because he had Social Security, because he had he had three legs of the stool: Social Security, he had a pension because of the labor's union, and he also had somewhat of savings, but he had a defined savings plan in his annuity fund. So he was able to retire with security and dignity. A bunch of years later, my dad died, and my mother, who's still alive, was able to enjoy that same benefit, was able to continue to live with dignity because my father had a pension, because my father had Social Security, and my mother had Social Security as well. My mother didn't have a pension, doesn't have a pension, I should say, and also has savings. And that opportunity allowed the immigrant family in Boston to be able to live and support themselves. And that really makes a difference in people's lives. It's fundamental to the dignity of work, and it's fundamental to the DOL's mission as we continue to move forward to make sure people can retire with security and dignity. EBSA enforces the laws that supports workers. I think everyone in this room knows that, but anyone that doesn't know it supports the laws. But our nation's retirement system does not provide security for all, as you heard Tom say. I think he said 16% of the people in this country have a defined pension plan. 16%. That means 84% of our country that's working right now or retired right now doesn't have a plan that's supporting them or their family. In the past, more workers had pensions with defined benefits for life, like my dad, my mom, and myself, eventually, when I retire. But most workers don't have the level of security. It certainly causes, I've seen it as a state legislator, I've seen it as the mayor of Boston, I've seen it as head of the building trades, the fear that it causes people, worried about what the future's gonna be. Polls show that retirement is a deep concern to Americans. Our workers are amongst the most productive in the world. Before I came here today, I met one of the big businesses in the country, and we were talking exactly about paying people with dignity and respect, and also making sure people can retire with dignity and respect. Planning your retirement should be simple, it should be easy, and it should be secure. No one should have to worry about outliving their money and living in poverty for the rest of their life. So in this campaign, we want to hear all about the challenges people are facing in every industry at every stage of their career. And let me just say this as questions, Kathleen starts to do the question answer. If somebody answered a question or gave a similar answer that you were going to give your answer anyway. Because people need to hear the stories. People need to hear the stories because you don't know what will trigger somebody today when they hear the conversation that's going to take place in a minute. We need to hear from workers. We need to hear from nonprofits. We need to hear from unions. We need to hear from social justice organizations. And we certainly need to hear from the financial sector. We need to understand the equity dynamics for marginalized workers. We need to eliminate the stigma. It's not your fault if you don't have enough saved. And we want to hear about solutions as well. So I'm grateful to everyone that's helping us launch this conversation. I look forward to hearing your experiences, your ideas, and your expertise. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Kathleen, who's going to kick off the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. And as you can see, we're so lucky to have the Secretary care very much about workers, all parts of the worker experience, and today the retirement experience. And I do know that you have a defined pension plan. We have a lot of speakers today, and as you can imagine, it reminds me of my my dining room table growing up. And we were quizzed every night about current events and history and famous people, and sometimes asked to recite a poem. And my mother was very clear about how long we were allowed to speak, only a few minutes, so everybody got a turn. And my father quizzed us over and over ago, where was the Battle of Bunker Hill? Breed's Hill. Yeah. Yeah. So just so you know, we were very focused on Boston.
It was your uncle's district, so you better have known it.
Yeah, oh, really? Anyway, so we're going to start, and I'm going to try. I did get a kitchen timer, which I don't use very much in my kitchen, but I'm using it on you. So, Chandra, could you start us off? Chandra runs Main Street Alliance, which is a national program across the United States. Tell us what you do, and could you introduce one of your members, please?
Sure. I'm scared about that kitchen timer, so I'm going to be brief.
Well, you'd be more scared if I could know how to work it.
So, Kathleen, everyone, thank you for having us here. I'm Executive Director of Main Street Alliance, and we organize small businesses on a number of different issues, including care economy. So things like paid leave, child care, and retirement benefits. These are the things that we believe that would change local communities and sustain small business owners. Our gift is lifting up the voices of small business owners. So let me have Deanna tell you in her own words. So this is Deanna Moore, and she owns a small business in Brooklyn.
Great. Wow. I can't believe I'm here. Everyone's very important, so thank you for giving me a seat at the table. I'm Deanna Moore. I own Friends and Lovers, a community-forward space in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. For the last 9 years, we've been providing a safe space for local community musicians and artists on the fringe. It's no secret that many small businesses and employees do not have retirement plans, as we know the stats now. While we all have tried to save, any savings had just disappeared during COVID. Not to mention the Omicron surge, which placed most people in very dangerous positions. They didn't know whether they were going to have money to put food on the table, and they were at risk of becoming homeless. My team rallied to raise funds and launch a $500 emergency spot grant, which we received 200 applications in 9 hours. I'm specifically talking about nightlife and hospitality workers, many of which are now reevaluating their career choices due to the uncertainty of the future and due to the lack of security. As a small business owner, this state-run retirement program provides peace of mind for me, other small businesses, and our employees. And this is why I'm excited to organize local small businesses with MSA around this issue. I've already spoken to my employees, other local businesses, and the Office of Nightlife. In fact, I have a lot of my own team members live streaming. They're watching me, and I'm waving hi. But I'm just really so excited to see this be implemented, and I can't thank you all enough.
And that was 2,000 applicants.
2,000 within 9
500.
hours for $500, just so that they can know that they can put food on the table.
Thank you. Well, you do a great job, and I love the name, Friends and Lovers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jen, you now work for Senator Menendez, but before that you worked for Unidos and you helped to organize Cal Saves. Could you tell us about your research as well as what you've done to organize?
Forgotten hers. And thank you, Randy, for the citation to Pensionomics. I was one of the authors of not that report, but the previous one, which is always very important. So one of the things that I've seen in my research, and I was one of the authors of a 2017 report on Hispanic retirement savings, is this is a systemic issue. Actually, if you look at the Survey of Consumer Finances, the most recent one, we're waiting for 2022 with bated breath, everyone. Hispanics only save, only 26% of Hispanics have any form of retirement savings, which has actually gone down since 2016. And this is a really troubling trend because, the Hispanic population is large. It's very large, 18.6% of the American population and growing. This is estimated to be 30% of the nation's population by 2050. And Also, what's very interesting about the Hispanic or Latino population is that it's very young, very, very young. The median age is 30. So we're talking about a young people's problem here. And this has always traditionally in the Latino population been an issue of who you work for. And so these state retirement savings plans like CalSavers and the New York Saves plan and even the New Jersey plan really solved this problem, especially out in California, where no matter who you work for, or how long you work there, or how many hours you work, you have a retirement plan offered to you for the first time, which has really solved some of the employment issues. Because again, in the Latino population, you have a good 1/3 who are working in agriculture or construction. Traditionally, unless you're in the building trades union, you're not offered a pension plan. You also have a large percentage being offered large percent of the Latinos who work in the hospitality industry, another area in which there's not really been traditional access to a retirement savings plan. So for the first time, we've really seen, because of these state retirement savings plans, all these folks first time have access to these plans for the first time. And so hopefully with the changing demographics of this population, folks who are going to school, college, getting college attainment for the first time, we'll see this change and we'll see some real improvement. And I'm sure that I'm very excited to see what happens in the 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances to see if this changes, this access changes, and we can really see with New York and California coming online if that access changes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jen. And Patricia, you're kind of wearing a number of hats today, both from the NAACP and from WISER, which is the women's group that focuses on retirement security. Could you talk to us about what's going on with the challenge for African Americans and the challenges for women?
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for inviting us at the NAACP to present today. I'm Patrice Willoughby, Vice President of Policy and Legislative Affairs, and also a board member of the Women's Institute for a Secure Retirement. I think the important thing to understand in advocacy is that that the systemic issues implicate holistic solutions, and that communities should understand that wage inequity is at the core of a lot of the savings deficit, but also culture matters, and there are needs of communities that are important to address holistically and authentically. For example, the state retirement savings plans, what we have found in WISER is that either state retirement savings plans or low dollar savings plans really lower the bar and lower the obstacles for people to save. It's also important to understand that with young people, speaking in an authentic voice and communicating the importance of compound interest and also offering solutions like mobile applications can provide an entryway to saving, both through emergency savings as well as understanding the importance of compound interest. Younger people, we also know, are more inclined to save when they feel an ownership interest in what they are saving for. For women, and particularly African American communities, understanding that there are differences between low and moderate income communities and first generation professionals. In many low and moderate income communities, there may be wage inequity, the same thing with first generation professionals who are often paying for aspects of their family's economic security. And so all of these things implicate retirement security. For the, on the issue of lowering barriers to entry, both auto enrollment, auto portability, auto escalation, and low dollar savings accounts are really critical in enhancing retirement security. And so understanding that within each of those areas there are advocates, there are communities of interest that should be aware that as you work on issues individually, there might be implications in other areas of the retirement security ecosystem that also can be allies in advancing economic security for Black Americans and for all Americans.
Thank you so much. I look forward to working with you some more. And Congressman, I'm so delighted that you could, we're also delighted that you could join us today. I know you work on many, many issues, but could you describe what you and Congress is doing on the retirement front?
Well, thank you very much. How could I resist the conference in my own district? As you know, Congress has been tied up in knots in a lot of things, but happily not on this one. A few weeks ago, on March 30th, the House passed a bill we call the Securing a Strong Retirement Act by a bipartisan vote of 415 to 5. It expands to expand retirement savings options for workers. The bill would do several things. It would increase the age at which individuals must start drawing on their retirement accounts up to 75 by 2033. It would expand tax incentives for small businesses to create retirement accounts and allow employers to make matching contributions to retirement accounts based on employee student loan payments. Beginning after 2023, new retirement plans, including 401k and 403b plans, would be required to automatically enroll all eligible employees with a contribution rate in the first year of at least 3% and no more than 10%. The rates would increase by 1 percentage point annually until it reaches at least 10% and no more than 15%. Under this bill, employees could opt out of the plan or choose to contribute different amounts. As I said, you know, the Congress has been tied up in not so many things, but with the 415 to 5 vote in the House, we're very optimistic about the Senate.
Thank you so much, and congratulations. It really is great to hear about something that could pass that high bipartisanship. And I'm so glad you could come and share that good news with us. Thank you. And Comptroller, it is now your turn, and I'm so glad you could join us as well. And congratulations on your election. Why do you think progressives should get involved in retirement security effort?
Well, thank you so much. First, let me say what an honor it is to be here with you and the Secretary, with my state colleague who's been a real supporter as I've stepped into office, with Congressman Nadler, who's a mentor of mine, but especially to be here at UFT with Mike Mulgrew and Randi Weingarten. First, I have to say, you know, we have the honor together as partners to be stewards of the retirement security of New York City teachers, and we're in the room with Deborah Penny and David Kazansky, who are trustees on the teachers' retirement system, $100 billion invested to secure the retirement security for teachers. Allison Hirsch, who represents me on that board, is here. And I really want to shout out the UFT because in addition to being strong stewards of the defined benefits pension, there is a tax-deferred annuity program, a 403b, where teachers can add and save on their own. And Mike mentioned the work to strengthen Tier 6 in the recent legislative session. So strong work to protect the retirement security of teachers and show it can be done in a really strong and progressive way. That fund is a leader on ESG issues, moving to divest from fossil fuel reserves, invest in climate solutions. And just today, we're joining Tom and his funds in pushing banks and insurance companies to move more urgently on climate. As soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, Mike and I were on the phone, and we became the first public pension system in the country to divest Russian securities. And last week, we launched a shareholder activism campaign, again in partnership with the state, really looking out for working people. We are deeply distressed by Amazon's failure to protect its workers. So we're launching a shareholder campaign to vote no on the 2 Amazon board members, Daniel Huttenlocker and Judith McGrath, who are supposed to provide oversight of human capital management at Amazon and have failed to do so. So urge people to look at deliveraccountability.com. And if you manage a pension fund and you want to support workers in a way that also is about real oversight of public companies that's appropriate for shareholders to hold directors accountable, check out deliveraccountability.com. So a lot to do there. On private sector support, first I got to give a shout out to my predecessor, Scott Stringer, who is in the room. He really convened the conversation in New York City to start pushing for a program at the city level. Worked with us. I was in the city council at the time, was proud to be a co-sponsor of legislation to implement that. The day that Mayor de Blasio signed it was the day the state said, all right, we are stepping up to implement a state-level program, the one that Tom described, and we all along had said the state would actually be a better place to do it. So as soon as the state sets up a program, that's the place that we want to be. So we're thrilled for that program. We're excited about the federal legislation that Congressman Nadler has spoken about. I'll just add one place where I think the city is leading that we can bring to this conversation, and that's looking at gig workers, independent contractors. The city, is proud to sponsor in the council the first legislation to require Uber and Lyft to pay a living wage to their workers, even though they continue to be classified as independent contractors. Did the same for deliveristas, for delivery workers who now have that as well. We passed groundbreaking legislation to protect freelancers called the Freelance Isn't Free Act, first legislation to protect freelancers from wage theft. So I think there's some ways that we could bring that whole set of workers into this conversation as well, and we'd be glad to talk more and work with all of you more. Long way to go just on employees in New York State. Until this gets in place, 60% of private sector workers don't even have access to a plan. 90% of workers in businesses of 10 employees or fewer don't even have access. So that'll get fixed when the state plan goes into effect. As part of our agenda for the future, let's also look at artists and musicians and Uber and Lyft drivers and nail salon techs and deliveristas and day laborers, a whole set of people who need retirement security just as much as the rest of us, and there are things we could do to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I think what you said, I just want to add to what you said, because in the state programs, basically 70% of the people sign up, but 30% don't. And that 30% probably does not, at this moment, are making a living wage, so it's hard for them to put 5% of their income into the program. But what you're doing is really important, because if people are earning a living wage in whatever they do, then they can afford to start saving for retirement. So I think making a living wage and retirement work together is a very, very critical conjunction.
Absolutely, and there might be some opportunities in the ESG space as well to be bringing resolutions or looking at companies and pushing them as part of that to be investing in their workers' retirement security.
Thank you for that very important point. Thank you. And speaking of low-income workers, I'm turning to Teresa, who has been fighting on this effort on all sorts of ways, talking, and every time you think about retirement, Teresa has something to say about it. Teresa Gallanducci from the New
Doing it
School.
for a long time.
Formerly from Notre Dame,
Yeah, that's.
and now back in New York. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm laser focused on the individuals in the room that can actually really make meaningful change. I just am seeing every one of you. But I'm realizing that we would not be empowered or equipped to be here today to do something about giving decent, dignified retirement security for everyone without the labor movement. My mother raised me on the labor movement, and we're not here, we wouldn't be here without that power. So that's who I want to thank, the labor movement. I've been doing research as an economist. I teach at the New School for Economic Research. It's in Greenwich Village, but for 25 years I was an economics professor at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. So I've been doing research on all aspects of retirement security. So I have many facts. This one is the one I'm bringing to you. In the next 10 years, and mark my words, in the next 10 years, 41% of people who are middle-class workers now, they're in their 50s, they're middle-class workers, all their life they've lived middle-class lives, those middle-class expectations, will be downwardly mobile into poverty or near poverty in their 60s. They'll be pushed out of work. The pandemic only accelerated, and when we get the new numbers, Jen, from the Fed, we will find that this number got worse. Now, this kind of downward mobility has political and economic consequences. We're now seeing in our data that there not only is a lot of shame in that, and we don't want a system that spreads shame, but there's enragement, and there's also a great deal of silent hardship. So if that's the one fact that I can impart from our research, that's it. The other one is actually shame on us. States and the federal government have, while this is going on, have created a tax expenditure system that is the most regressive in the tax code. 70% of the $250 billion that the states and the federal government spend to incent retirement savings goes to people who don't need it. The top 20% gets 70%. The bottom 20% gets in the single digits. The middle class are also left out. You have to have a plan, you have to put a lot in the plan, and you have to be at a top tax rate. So that's all on us. So in an unlikely partnership, in the years and years I've been looking at retirement security, I've just written a paper with former President Trump's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett. And our paper has become the basis of a proposal now that just came out of Legislative Council to radically change our pension system. The Economic Innovation Group in Washington is creating the plan and creating the lobbying structure for that plan. And this is what it does. It provides a professionally managed account for all eligible workers. These are workers right now without a retirement savings plan. Our proposal mirrors the design features of the thrift savings plan. That helps members of Congress understand what it is, but it also mirrors the design features of a multi-employer plan, this hybrid defined contribution, defined benefit plan, and my own plan, Teachers Insurance Annuity Program. It is simple, it has low-cost investments, it has non-conflicted advice, it has many decent retirement options, it's not for profit, and it has the features of a retirement plan that are unlike Secure Choice, unlike the state plans. The plan is in there until you retire. Under our proposal, traditional workers, but also gig workers, contingent workers, people who are temporarily out of work workers, self-employed workers, will be automatically enrolled in a life cycle fund. And eligible low and middle income people, this is Kathleen teed it up for us, and this is what Secure Choice doesn't do, and Secure 2.0 it doesn't do. These people will receive matching contributions from a refundable tax credit. That's the key, everyone. That's what none of these plans do. That will also be a cradle, a not-for-profit professional account for which all workers, because they go in and out of plans, will be able to roll over their IRAs and their 401ks. The accounts are pooled. They leverage the economies of scale of a large fund, just like rich people do and just like people in defined benefit plans do. They get the highest risk-adjusted, fee-adjusted rate of return that you could possibly do. Everybody should be able to get that. In closing, our plan checks all the boxes. Workers save consistently. They get the compound interest. They get a match. The investments are professionally managed. They're low-fee portfolios, and they provide annuity options for lifetime income. I'll be happy to talk to anybody offline about the particular work we're doing in Congress. We have Democrats, we have Republicans in both the House and the Senate, all keyed up to implement, not to propose this plan.
Teresa, you are terrific, and we're going to hear more from you in the days and weeks to come, and I think that bill is going to be introduced soon, as you told me. So thank you so much. It's very exciting what you are up to. You may not have realized this, but this group has been divided into three parts. One was getting access to retirement in the first place. The second issue is, once you have retirement and you want to change jobs, how can you take your retirement from one job to the next? The statistics are completely awful. Because of leakage and the lack of ability to take your retirement plan from job to job, lots of money is lost. In fact, $2 trillion over a 40-year period, according to EBRI, $98 billion per year. This is outrageous and unacceptable. And so we're going to hear first from Andrew from Boston College. Go Eagles. Please tell us why that is happening, and then we're going to hear from Deb Whitman at AARP what the solution is. Thank you.
Kathleen, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody else, your colleagues at the Department of Labor and everybody who's hosting us here today. I want to start off by saying that I really appreciate something that Secretary Walsh said about a system that's simple and easy. And I'm going to describe an aspect of the system that is not simple or easy, and it's just one aspect of the retirement system. And that is, what does a worker do when they change jobs and they've got a 401k account? They have 4 options. All of these options have some potential issues, but they can cash out the money, they can leave it in the current employer plan, they can move it to an IRA, or they can move it to a new employer 401k. Does that sound like a system already that's simple and easy? So let me just go through quickly what some of the issues are with these options in order of bad to better, or best even. The first option, cashing out, is obviously not good in the sense that it takes the money out of the retirement system. It's no longer locked away. You no longer have that nest egg for the compound interest to grow. The second option, leaving it in the employer plan, can be a good decision depending on the quality of the employer plan that you have. But particularly for small accounts, it's often better not to do that. One of the reasons is if you have a really small account, $5,000 or less, your employer can take that money, your old employer, and move it into a money market account, a low-yielding account, and the fees can actually make that account go down over time. That's a big problem for people who move around from job to job and have a lot of small accounts. Those people can also end up losing track of their money entirely. The third thing is that you could roll it into an IRA. Now, one advantage of the IRA is presumably if you took the action of moving it into the IRA, you'll remember the money's there. So that's good. But the IRA environment is moving into a retail environment from a protected environment. So a 401k plan is protected under ERISA with fiduciary responsibilities. And when you move it into the IRA, you're kind of more in the Wild West. Might work out well, it might not work out well. But you could end up with higher fees than you intended. And it's easy, and it's just the lack of regulation makes them risky. So the fourth option, arguably the best in most cases, is moving it from a 401k plan to a new 401k plan. Best option. Interesting fact though, it's one of the hardest things to do. That's why it doesn't happen enough. Why is it hard to move money from a 401k to another 401k? The system is really not designed to make this a priority. That's the issue. First of all, the new plan is not even required to accept a rollover from an old 401k. So you may be stymied at step 1 when you're switching jobs. Secondly, the old 401k record keeper, they don't have any incentive to get rid of the money quickly. They're managing assets, they get paid for managing assets. So the whole thing happens in slow motion. Even if you can do it, there's a lot of paperwork involved, and there can take many months to happen. And I'm not even getting it into the fact what happens when the employer issues a check to you directly instead of to the plan. That creates its own problems. So this is just one aspect of the system I think is really important for us to focus on.
It's completely awful. Just so you know, no, I'm just telling you. So when I
Do you have an opinion of that?
Oh, I totally do. Because when I was talking to your staff, your political staff, and I was describing, they said, oh, Kathleen, you're working with seniors. So I said, no, I'm working with people your age. And I described the problem with moving from job to job. Every person at the Department of Labor said, oh, Kathleen, I have 4 accounts. Oh, Kathleen, I have 5 accounts. They're sitting on my desk. They are so intimidating, I'm not doing anything. So that is all your people, just so you know. Okay, now we're the solution.
So the good news, you are working with seniors. So I'm with AARP. We're 38 million people over age 50.
Just make sure everybody knows who you are.
I'm Deb Whitman.
Oh, sorry. This is Deb Whitman, who is fabulous. She also worked for a Democratic senator from Massachusetts, so-called Senator Kennedy, so I have a special warmth for her. She doesn't like to admit it because AARP is nonpartisan.
We are nonpartisan, but it was, I very much enjoyed working for your on-call and healthcare. So let me just say these 2 things to you. One, all of these things we're talking about are immensely popular. I mean, popular in an insane level. And two, they're solvable. So let me go into the popular part, because these are the things that we hear from our members. So if we think about coverage, as we talked about the data, half of the people in this country have no way to save. If we look at coverage, we know that 8 in 10 workers support things like the state-based programs that are springing up across the country. We mentioned that 14 have already passed, including here in the great state of New York. And I want to thank Beth Finkel from our ARP New York State office. But we've got another 20 states that are looking at this, because it's not a red or a blue state issue. It's popular all over. 84% of people in Oklahoma, 80% of people in South Carolina, 88% of people in Kansas think these programs are a good idea. The second issue, and Andy laid it out, is portability. People are losing money, and 99% of people said that they want it to be easier to move money from account to account. 99% of Americans agree on almost nothing except for this. And then third, the other thing is managing their money when they retire. There are tons of pitfalls, and I know we'll get into that just a little bit, but 3 out of 4 people are anxious about having enough money when they retire. So let me talk specifically about portability. The good news is the coverage issues are legislative issues, and Congressman Nadler talked about how legislative issues on retirement are somewhat this special class that is still bipartisan today. The legislative issues are being passed state by state by state. It would be great if every American in this country could save for their paycheck. On portability, Secretary Walsh, a lot of these are regulatory issues that you and your team in EBSA could handle right away. You heard from Andy, not all employers are accepting transfers. It is complicated. They send you a check, and then you have to supplement that with money that they withhold to pay your taxes. A lot of times that doesn't happen in the 90-day window. So you can make some regulatory requirements of employers so that the handoff, it's employers, record keepers, providers, so that the handoff is seamless for individuals. When they start a new job, they give their old account numbers, and that's it. They say, we want that, and that's done. These are things that we can do. And lastly, I just say that the time is now, because all of these things take years in which to build up the assets to provide people a secure retirement. And we talked about most people don't have that money. And so if we do these now, maybe my kids will have a secure retirement that they don't have to worry about. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Deb. Yeah, because if we don't do it, at the age of 60, 30%, the average person loses 60% of their retirement because of lack of portability and leakage. So if we do it, next. Next, great. Well, guess what we're going to do next? State Street. Brendan, could you tell us about what you're doing on lifetime, the challenges of lifetime income, why you've moved to develop lifetime income products, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kathleen. And start off by saying my 4-year-old would not let me speak for 3 minutes straight, so I will keep my comments brief because I imagine this audience wants some time back as well. Incredibly grateful to be part of this important discussion. Really interesting to hear from so many great speakers on how we can make it easier for average Americans to save and have access through a retirement plan. At State Street, we're enthusiastic supporters of these efforts, as evidenced by our partnership with Cal Savers, Oregon Saves, and our collaboration with organizations such as AARP in advocating for new state and federal initiatives. As we look to the future, and the topic that I've been asked to speak on, we believe there's a case to be made for greater innovation as it relates to lifetime income, especially within defined contribution plans. We believe this is such an important area for future and further innovation for 3 key reasons. First, it's the transition that so many others have talked about in terms of moving from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans that's currently underway, especially amongst private employers. To me, the best way to sort of empathize with this story is look at it on the personal level. And I think we can all have experience with this. I look to my own family. My grandfather worked for a large corporation in Lynn, Massachusetts his entire career. Got to retirement age with a meaningful pension, It gave him that dignity, that security that so many others have talked about, to retire with confidence. Went to his basement, tinkered, listened to polka records. Fast forward a generation, look at my uncle. Similar career experience, similar career trajectory, better music taste, but unfortunately is getting to retirement age without that defined benefit plan. And as others spoke about, he's not unique in that. He has that defined contribution plan. Only 16% of individuals today have that defined benefit plan. What that means is that he has less confidence about how to make that transition. How does he make the money last in retirement? This challenge is compounded by some relatively positive news, and that is, statistically speaking, individuals are living longer lives today than they have in the past. Looking at individuals age 65, more than 1 in 3 will live to be the age of 90 or older. But that suggests a decades-long time in retirement over which they're trying to draw down these assets, self-manage them. 3, and really finally, without guaranteed income, many late career employees lack that financial confidence to retire, and it starts to stress the employer in terms of balancing their demographics, challenge with the rising costs, and also the challenge of retaining rising talent. At State Street, these facts have guided our thinking for the development of a solution called IncomeWise. It's a next generation target date fund that offers participants, individual employees, the ability to purchase deferred annuity. The goal with this solution is to make the transition into retirement easier for the average American by giving them the financial flexibility that they desire in those early years of retirement, with financial security, confidence, insurance later in life. We're proud of the fact that we've partnered with the University of California to implement this solution within their defined contribution plans last year. As we look ahead, we want to solve for future generations to deliver that same retirement security and dignity that so many others have talked about that my grandfather had enjoyed.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you very much. I hope we can help your grandchildren enjoy what your grandfather had.
Grandchildren.
Well, my daughter's here, so I'm thinking. I'm sending signals. Okay. This is Kat, and she's in your old district. She's just moved to Brooklyn.
Excellent.
Anne, please, I know you and BlackRock have worked for over 3 years to develop a lifetime income product. Could you describe why it took you 3 years and why, and what can the private sector do to help people retire?
Sure. Thanks, Kathleen, and thank you for allowing us to be part of this really important conversation. I'm Ann Ackerley, and I head the retirement group at BlackRock. For those of you who don't know BlackRock, we're an asset manager, and more than half the money that we manage is on behalf of people's retirements, including pensions for nurses, factory workers, and teachers. And I just want to say I'm especially honored to be here with the AFT and the UFT because I come from a very long line of teachers. My grandfather, my mom, who taught for 35 years on Long Island, and now my son, who's getting his teacher certification in New York City this semester. Right. He hasn't quite asked me about retirement, but I'm sure he will. So for me, it is quite personal, and for my colleagues at BlackRock, that we do believe passionately that every worker, including teachers like my mom, should be able to retire with dignity. And as we thought about this problem, and you've heard all the challenges today, we focused on the fact that the #1 financial fear in the U.S. today is the fear of outliving your savings. And so at BlackRock, we wanted to do more to help people with lifetime income that they used to get in a DB plan, and could we get it to them in a defined contribution plan? And so we took the time to develop, as you said, LifePath Paycheck. It is designed to provide more security in retirement. Essentially, and not to go through the ins and outs, but it's a target date fund that gives you the option to annuitize. And just to put it very simply, you can get a steady stream of income for life so that you won't run out of money in retirement in a 401k plan. And Kathleen, it did take us 3 years to develop because nobody really had done this before. And we had some guiding lights, which were it had to be affordable, it had to be easy to use, and it had to be easy to understand. And to do this, we had to bring a lot of different players together, the record keepers, the insurance companies, consultants, the employers. It took us time to bring everybody together to build this product. And so I'll just say, we're excited, it's simple, it's affordable, and we're going to continue to do everything we can so people can retire with dignity.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that you did spend the 3 years. Something worth doing sometimes takes a long time. So,
It does.
Very, very wonderful of you to talk about that. Thank you. And we're going to end on a person who runs a fabulous organization. It's bipartisan, and it brings a lot of people all across the country together. Layla, could you describe the Millennial Action Project?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. I run the Millennial Action Project, which is the largest nonpartisan nonprofit for young policymakers across the political spectrum. And so I represent a network of more than 1,600 young state and congressional legislators. My job is to help connect them to each other around common sense solutions. And we do that through something called a Future Caucus, which is like a mini map chapter in the legislature. And so we're in 31 states right now, as well as the Congressional Future Caucus in the House of Representatives. And what brings these lawmakers together is not one specific policy idea, but more the deep belief that we have to stop relying on short-term solutions to long-term problems. Young people are facing systemic challenges and inequalities that will only compound the longer that we pursue inadequate action, or even worse, kick the can down the road for the next generation to deal with. And I don't think I have to tell anyone in this room that millennials and Gen Z have had a hard go of it saving and building up wealth. And so retirement security is one of the most perfect issues for my network to work on. It is a looming threat that is facing young people. And yet, as we've heard, there are so many clear and urgent opportunities for policymakers to come together around. Our Future Caucus members have already started to do that. Secretary Walsh, in your home state of Massachusetts, one of our young members, State Senator Eric Lesser, who is in his 30s, worked with other leaders to introduce and establish legislation for a statewide program that would encourage employers and organizations to innovate and establish portable benefit systems for workers. In Illinois, State Rep Will Guzzardi, who's in his 20s, introduced and helped pass the Retirement Savings Expansion Act, which is bipartisan legislation to ensure that businesses provide employees with access to a retirement plan or to the Illinois state program. And these are just two examples of an idea that I think many of us are familiar with, which is that states are the laboratories of democracy, as are cities. And I think what I'm seeing from my young policymakers and what we've heard a little bit here today is that there is bipartisan appetite to do work on this, and that there is a clear pathway to future federal action as well. And I think I'm so encouraged to see this generation come together on this issue because we literally cannot afford inaction. And so I just hope everybody in this room knows that Millennial Action Project is here to be a partner to all of you as you do this work, and as we help the next generation come together to save responsibly for their futures.
Thank you. That's our panel.
No, let me just thank everyone who spoke today. Lots of great conversation, lots to think about, quite honestly. And I was just whispering in Randy's ear a minute ago. It really is going to be important for us as we think about retirement securities down the road, that it's not just the employee paying into their fund. We have to really think about how do we change that dynamic, because people just won't save enough money for their retirement if it's left to themselves. I can speak from experience. You know, at the time when you're younger, if it's put 15% in your retirement or your 401k or whatever savings you have, or put food on the table, you're going to take the food on the table, or maybe the car in the driveway or on the street. So I look forward to having more conversations after this. I look forward to having many dialogues with all of you. As you can clearly see, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, I think I work for her, because she kept looking at me for the answer, and I'm like, well, you know, but I want to again thank you all for being part of this, and just to Michael, thank you, Congressman, thank you for having us in your district today, and to my dear friend Randy, thank you for everything you always do on behalf of working people, not just teachers, but every working person in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. There's food in the other room.
Before we leave, just make sure we also introduce the Secretary of Labor for New York State is in the hall, Roberta Reardon. I just want to make sure that we introduce Roberta.
And also Chris Curtis, who's running the state plan in New York. So we've talked a lot about your plan, so thank you, Chris, for being here too. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
In front?
Okay.